My mom told me, "This isn't a shelter, Serene. You're not some refugee after my house burned down." But the worst part was realizing what they really wanted from me, not who I was. Until I found their darkest secret hidden in plain sight. This is a story about how I learned the painful truth that sometimes the people closest to you don't love you for who you are, but for what you can give. And how losing everything was the only way to finally find myself. For 8 years, I was the family's ATM, their personal fixer. Dad's cholesterol meds not covered? I handled it. Mom's car needed brakes? Camille's dog needed surgery? I didn't hesitate. Rent, groceries, vet bills, even a down payment Camille couldn't qualify for. There was always something, and I always found a way. I told myself it was love, that this is what family did, that being the one who had it together came with silent responsibilities. I wasn't married, no kids, flexible job. So, I became the buffer, the one who stepped in quietly so no one else had to worry. Mom used to call me the steady one. She'd say it like a compliment, but it always sounded like she was talking about furniture. Dependable, always there. Camille, my sister, called me practical, but only when I paid for things she forgot to plan for. No one ever asked if I had enough, or if I even wanted to be this person. I don't remember the last time any of them asked how I was doing. Last Christmas, I gave Camille's son a new iPad for school. She hugged me in front of everyone and whispered, "You really saved me this month." But then, when I sat down at the dinner table, she immediately shifted the conversation to how hard it was being a full-time mom and how no one understood her pressure. Mom nodded sympathetically, passing the rolls. I just sat there, still holding my plate, like the meal might finally include me. At first, I thought I just needed to give more. That eventually, if I kept showing up, they'd notice not just what I gave, but who I was. But every time I thought we were getting closer, the next call came. Another emergency, another transaction, another polite thank you followed by a silence that stretched too long. The truth was, they didn't see me. They saw access, stability, someone who could carry their weight without asking for anything back. And so, I did. Until the night I lost everything. The fire didn't even start in my unit. It was the apartment next door, faulty wiring, I think. But by the time the smoke snaked into my hallway, it was already too late. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and a folder with my tax documents. Everything else was smoke-soaked or soaked again when the sprinklers burst into life overhead. I stood outside for nearly an hour, watching flames curl out of the roof like ribbons. By midnight, I was still shaking, not just from the cold, but from a hum in my chest that no amount of deep breathing could quiet. I didn't know where to go. The hotel near Route 4 was fully booked. The motels near the highway were sketchy enough to make me hesitate. So I just drove. Upper Saddle River felt like a different world. Manicured lawns, stone driveways, motion sensor, porch lights. The rain followed me there, colder now, slicing sideways through my coat. I parked at the bottom of the long drive, engine still running, staring at the warm light glowing behind the living room windows. I tried to tell myself I wasn't intruding, that it was okay to ask for just one night. I rang the bell once. My mother opened the door in a silk robe, one of the pale ones she reserved for housewear, and stood half in shadow with her arms crossed. The foyer behind her smelled like lemon cleaner and comfort. Camille leaned against the kitchen island in a cashmere wrap, swirling a glass of wine like we were in a TV drama and not real life. "I just need a few nights," I said quietly, "until I figure something out." Mom didn't blink. She let out a long exhale, sharp and slow. "This isn't a shelter, Serene. You're not some refugee." I waited for Camille to chime in, for someone to move, to make room. But she just tilted her head, her wine glass still in hand, like she'd seen this scene play out before and was waiting for it to end. I swallowed. "Just until I find another apartment." Mom waved a hand toward the darkness behind me. Ask one of those charities you donate to, or maybe a cousin you paid tuition for. Her voice was calm, final. I didn't beg. I just turned and walked back into the rain, the sound of the door closing behind me louder than it should have been. The rain clung to me like skin, and by the time I reached the car, I couldn't tell where my body ended and the cold began. The motel smelled like bleach and lemon, but neither could cover the scent of loneliness that seeped from the walls. I didn't bother taking off my shoes. I just sat on the edge of the bed, letting the weight of what just happened settle into my shoulders. The heater clicked on with a reluctant buzz. I stared at the stained ceiling and felt something in me go quiet. Not numb, but sharp, focused. At 4:12 a.m., I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. Bank of America, Chase, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle. One by one, I went through them all. I canceled every recurring payment that wasn't mine. Camille's mortgage, Dad's satellite radio and magazine subscriptions, Mom's grocery card, the joint family phone plan, even the auto transfer labeled household that had been going out on the 15th of every month for the last 6 years. Gone. With every click, it felt like I was peeling off layers of someone else's life I'd been wearing like debt. There was no anger in my chest, just clarity. Cold, precise clarity. I didn't owe them explanations. They'd never asked me why I gave, only how much and how fast. So, I didn't offer apologies either. I moved through each screen like I was scrubbing, dishes no one ever thanked me for. The last account I touched was the trust, the one I set up years ago after a lawyer friend advised me to protect assets in case of emergency. It was modest, mostly untouched, but I removed myself from management and locked it down. No warning, no discussion. By the time the sun began bleeding into the sky, my hands were still steady. I placed my phone on the bedside table and finally let myself close my eyes. The vibration started before 6, a low, constant hum that rattled the nightstand. I ignored it at first, but it didn't stop. When I picked it up, the screen lit with 51 missed calls, 18 from Mom, 20 from Camille, a scattering from Dad, my cousin Alina, even Jace who hadn't texted me in months. And then there it was, dead center in the preview of the last message. Camille, don't you dare cut off the mortgage autopay. Not, are you okay? Not, where are you? Not even, I'm sorry. I let the phone fall onto the thin blanket beside me. The room was still, the air stale, but I could breathe in it. They didn't call because they missed me. They called because the money stopped. So I took a shower with the motel's chalky bar of soap and put on the cleanest clothes I had left. Then I reached for my keys. There was one more thing I needed to do. The envelope came just after noon, dropped off at the motel's front desk without a name, just my room number written in a slanted, rushed cursive. The clerk handed it over without looking up. I took it with the same numb fingers I'd used to sign every check for the past 8 years. Back in my room, I peeled it open slowly. Inside were 3 folded documents, old, slightly yellowed at the edges. The header on the first one read, Homeowner's Insurance Policy Update. My name was typed neatly at the top, followed by the word beneficiary. But it had been crossed out sloppily once in pen, and then again with correction fluid. Beneath it, in new ink, someone had written in Camille's name. The change was dated 3 weeks before the fire. My hand stilled over the page. I read it twice, then again, as if reading it differently would undo what I was seeing. But the line was too clean, too deliberate. There hadn't been a conversation, no heads up, no explanation. They'd just removed me like I was an error on a spreadsheet. Like I had never kept the policy current. Like I hadn't been the one to set it up in the first place, using my own credit to qualify when Mom's score was too low. And now, with the house gone, the payout would go to Camille. Not even a shared payout, not even split. just her. It hit differently than the night before. The motel, the rain, the closed door. They were cruel, yes, but impulsive, emotional. This was cold. This had a signature, my father's. I remembered the red binder Mom handed me last year when a pipe burst under their sink. She'd smiled, casual, and said, "Just in case." I thought it meant I was trusted, included. Turns out they had already made other plans. I pressed my thumb over the line where my name used to be. Not out of sentiment, but confirmation. I needed to know what I was feeling wasn't just grief. It was betrayal, and it had paperwork to prove it. I folded the documents neatly, slid them back into the envelope, and tucked them beneath my coat. The air in the room felt thinner than before, like the truth had drawn out the last bit of illusion I'd been clinging to. It wasn't just that they turned me away, it was that they'd never really intended to keep me. I hadn't seen Aunt Esme in almost a decade. She was the kind of relative who slipped through family gatherings like a shadow. Quiet, observant, never loud enough to be accused of meddling. But when I saw her in the library, holding 2 paper cups of tea like she'd been expecting me, I sat down without asking why. "You look tired," she said gently, sliding 1 cup across the table. "That's generous," I muttered, hands wrapped around the heat. It was the first kindness I'd received in days that didn't come with strings. She sipped hers slowly before speaking again. "Your mother used to talk about you all the time. Said you were distant, cold, too practical." I gave a hollow laugh. "Even when I bought her that Lexus?" Esme's eyes didn't flinch. "Especially. Then, she'd say, 'Serene doesn't hug, but she'll hand you the keys to a car.' I didn't know whether to laugh or fold in on myself. I thought she was proud." "She was," Esme said, "of your usefulness, not your heart." The words settled like dust in a room I hadn't entered before. "She liked telling people you were the responsible one," Esme continued, "but that was just code for the one we can lean on without guilt. You were the fallback plan, the exit strategy, the one who never made noise." I stared down into my tea. I thought if I kept showing up, they'd finally see me. Not as a bank account, as family. Esme's gaze was steady. "They never wanted your love, Serene. They wanted your resources. And they told you the same lie we've all heard. If you don't give, you don't love. But that's not love. That's control." I felt something loosen in my chest, like a knot I'd been tightening myself for years. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. When I left, I didn't cry. I just walked through the double-glass doors with the envelope still tucked under my arm, the air outside sharper than before. Not cruel, just clear. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to see the story for what it really was. Back at the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop open and my hands hovering over the keyboard. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a sense that the world was still turning the same way it had before the fire. Maybe something familiar to remind me that I wasn't the one losing my grip. I typed in the name of the neighborhood Facebook group. I remembered my mother used to post there all the time, photos of Camille's volunteer drives, my father's retirement brunch, even one of me from 3 years ago when I'd helped repaint their porch. She'd captioned it, "Grateful for family who always shows up." But that post was long gone now. The newest one was pinned at the top, posted 2 hours earlier. "Prayers up for the Duvals, after everything they've been through, losing their home, struggling to rebuild, now this." Betrayal hurts most when it comes from your own. Their daughter cut them off without warning. No one deserves that. There was a photo beneath it. Camille standing in front of the charred remains of the porch. Eyes glassy, an expression just right for sympathy. My parents stood on either side of her, arms around each other as if they'd weathered a storm together. I kept scrolling, slower now. I heard she was the one funding them, then just vanished. No warning. That's ice cold. Guess some people forget blood ties when the money stops. My name wasn't in any of the comments, but I was in every sentence. They had scrubbed me out, rewritten the entire script without me. I wasn't the one who had stayed late at night on the phone wiring money across state lines, making sure Camille didn't lose her house, making sure Mom had her prescription refilled. I wasn't the daughter who kept the lights on or made sure the mortgage never lapsed. I was the villain now. Cold, heartless, absent. And the worst part was, no one would know better. Not unless I told them. I closed the laptop slowly, the plastic warm under my palms. The motel room buzzed faintly with the hum of the heater. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel cold. I felt clear. They had their version. Now it was time I started writing, mine. The knock came just after 8, not timid. 3 firm hits, then 2 more like punctuation. I looked through the peephole and knew immediately. My mother, standing in the yellow motel hallway light, rain clinging to her scarf, purse clenched, under one arm like she was holding something fragile or ready to throw it. I opened the door but didn't step aside. She brushed past me anyway, heels clicking on the cheap carpet like she still owned every room she entered. She turned sharply to face me, arms crossed, mouth tight. "You've created a disaster," she said. No greeting, no preamble. "Camille's mortgage is in limbo. Your father hasn't gone to church since the fire. He's humiliated." I said nothing. The words filled the space like smoke, curling around the truth she didn't want to name. Her voice rose. "Do you even understand what you've done? This isn't about money, Serene. It's about how we look." I blinked. "That's what matters to you?" She rolled her eyes. "People talk. They assume things." I nodded slowly. "Let them." She flinched, just barely. I took a breath, steady. "For years, I gave you whatever you needed, not because you asked kindly, but because I thought eventually you'd see me. Not for what I gave, but for who I was." She looked away, jaw clenched. I stepped forward, not threatening, just honest. "You don't get to erase me and still expect my silence." She scoffed. "So what now? You want us to beg?" "No," I said calmly. "I want you to manage the way I always had to. Quietly. Without thanks." Her face twisted. "You think you're better than us?" I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I just stopped pretending I was less." That stopped her. She picked up her purse slowly, like a judge gathering her robe. "You've changed. I finally stopped apologizing for not being Camille." Her hand hesitated on the doorknob. For a second, I thought she might say something real, something human. But whatever flickered in her expression disappeared. She left, without another word. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence that followed didn't sting. It settled, solid, final. I rinsed my face in the tiny motel sink, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside. The rain had slowed to a mist. I walked without thinking, boots scuffing pavement, until I reached the diner across the street. The waitress didn't ask questions. She just poured me coffee and slid over a plate of pancakes I hadn't ordered. I ate them anyway, alone, untouched. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. Back in the room, I opened my laptop and clicked on the file I'd started the night before. Then I began to write, line by line. Everything I had paid for, everything they'd taken. The call came just after I'd finished typing up the last entry. April 22nd, $4,000 for Camille's mortgage, marked simply, Tyrone out of work. Her name lit up my phone screen like an old bruise, familiar, tender, and not quite healed. I let it ring twice before answering. "What do you want?" I asked, flat. Her voice cracked immediately. "You ruined everything," she said, trembling somewhere between panic and accusation. "The bank's freezing the credit line. Mom's crying. Dad's canceled his meetings. No one knows what's happening. I stayed quiet, let her fill the silence with the collapse. You made us depend on you, she said after a pause. And then you just walked away like it meant nothing. No, I replied, calm but unmoved. You chose to depend on me. I never asked for that. You built your life around my silence, not my consent. There was a hitch in her breath, like the words had landed somewhere she didn't expect. I didn't have a choice, Serene, she whispered. You had the credit. I needed the mortgage. You said you'd help. I did help, I said, over and over. But help became habit became expectation, and expectation turned into entitlement. She didn't argue, just breathed into the phone like she was holding back a scream. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I know, I said. But it did. I leaned back in the motel chair, one hand still resting on the laptop's warm keyboard. And now, I added, you'll figure it out the same way I did. Another pause, then quietly, are you really cutting us off for good? I didn't answer. Not directly. I just ended the call and set the phone face down beside me. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt unhooked, like a weight I didn't realize was dragging behind me had finally come loose. I stood, walked, to the tiny fridge, and poured myself the last of the motel's lukewarm coffee. As I took a sip, the inbox pinged again. Another message, another voicemail, another alert. But I didn't check. Instead, I opened a clean document titled "It Starts Here" and began to draft something new. Not a list, not a bill, just a map. A future. Mine. The new apartment was small, second floor, no elevator, but the key was mine, and my name was on my lease. No shared accounts, no emergency contacts I didn't choose. Just a chipped countertop, a clean fridge, and the quiet hum of space that finally belonged to me. Each morning I made coffee and opened my laptop at the same fold-out table I'd once used to itemize family expenses. The spreadsheet still lived in its folder, renamed Proof of Love, not for them to see, just for me, to remind myself that what I gave wasn't meaningless. It was just misplaced. Twice a week, I volunteered at a nonprofit downtown, mentoring women rebuilding after financial abuse. I didn't tell them my whole story, but I knew how to listen for the signs. How silence hides struggle. How control wears the mask of kindness. One afternoon, I came home to a plain white envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a letter from one of the women I'd worked with. She wrote, "Because of you, I opened my own account. I feel like my life is finally mine." At the bottom, just 6 words. You changed someone's life. Thank you. I folded the letter and slipped it into the same folder as the spreadsheet, the one that started it all. That night, I stood by the window, warm tea in hand, and listened. Not for a call, or a knock, or a crisis, but for the silence that finally meant peace. And this time, I let it stay.